I took away from that is that no one's really that sure. The people on that panel were fairly representative of people who know what they're talking about in this industry, and none of them could really nail it. And I think they were just being honest. I think no one really knows. So there's two subsets of how to monetize 5G. There's consumer facing and business facing, B2C, B2C. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. This is a special one shot from the lobby of the Montcalm Hotel Marble Arch. And the reason we're in this lobby is that we've just had the Telecoms.com live event that I've been banging on about for the last 3 weeks. So thanks to that, quite a few people actually turned up. It was fairly full room. So that was all good. And it was all me and Jamie up on stage asking people questions, which we'll get into in a sec. Obviously, as we've just got the one camera getting all of us, you know that I'm with Jamie and Ian this week. The other little bits of housekeeping, if you listen to it on iTunes or SoundCloud or other platforms, you can watch it. I've done it the wrong way around. You can watch it on Facebook or YouTube or some other stuff, or the site, yeah. And so this week, before I get into the last bit of housekeeping, I have to remember so much stuff now. This week we're going to chat about the event and the main themes of the event. And then, Jamie, you're going to talk a little bit about a sort of clever fibre initiative in South America, is that right? And Ian, you're going to talk about a show you went to that was sort of Telco AI. Yeah. Okay, so those are the things we're going to talk about. And then the last bit of housekeeping is, of course, our illustrious sponsor. So I'll shut up now and let you listen to their message.
Mobile service providers will need a different approach to successfully roll out 5G new radio capabilities. Check out Amdocs Software automated and analytics-driven solutions at amdocs.com/5G-fast to learn more.
Okay, thank you, sponsor, for making this all happen. Right, so the event I thought was really cool. We were kind of winging it, me and Jamie. We'd never done this before. We just thought, basically, let's try and bring this podcast into a live environment. Obviously, we couldn't just sit here like now and just expect people to just come in a room and watch us record a podcast. So we did 4 one-on-one interviews and 2 panel sessions. The sort of morning was more about Jamie's sessions, which was dominated by talk about sort of fixed line infrastructure, UK infrastructure, how the UK is doing in terms of its telecoms infrastructure. So I think I'll just hand over to you, Jamie. Why don't you just give us the top line of the kind of stuff you chatted about?
It's more about the idea that the UK isn't necessarily in as good a position as everyone thinks it is.
Right.
The UK was one of the first to launch 5G services worldwide, and I think that took a little bit of the sort of the dull paint off the mural that is the UK connectivity landscape at the moment. Ultimately, fibre is still low penetration. There's a lot of background noise from Parliament and the sort of general political arena, which is really causing some problems, I think.
You kept referring to Daily Telegraph columns when you were talking.
That wasn't me. That was
someone else.
Was it?
No.
Right.
That was
who did that?
that was Phil. That was Phil Kelly.
Oh, so it was. Sorry, my bad. But he's obviously referring to Boris Johnson indirectly. Yeah.
But I think ultimately we had Greg Mesh on this morning, the CEO of City Fibre, and I think he, although it is a little bit of bang his own drum, I think he did make a very valid point in that most European markets will insist on having 4 MNOs to preserve competition and create a sort of an attractive environment for the consumer.
They've brought our drinks. Keep going, Jamie, but we've got some nice drinks coming up as well.
Should we talk about the drinks?
Yeah. What drink are you having, Ian?
Gin and tonic.
Go on, son.
It's not too early.
I would have joined you in gin and tonic, but I've got to do the awards later, so I can't be too loaded before the whole thing's done. So I'm just having this. Anyway, carry on, mate.
But Mesh's point was very appropriate, and it was about the case of we only genuinely have one an option for sort of like wholesale fixed connectivity. He kept on phrasing it as 1.5 fixed line infrastructure providers across the UK, because ultimately you have to, if you're not a Virgin customer, you're going across the Openreach network, and Virgin Media, as it stands, only covers, they've got 5.6 million subscribers. And
2/3 of the country. They're trying to.
Yeah, but even when
Well, that's their geographical coverage.
nowhere near that at the moment.
Population coverage.
Household coverage. So they want, by the end of Project Lightning, they want to have 15 million premises connected on their network. There's 24 million households in the UK. But
they're about 50% at the moment.
Yeah, they're about 50% of the way through that. So it, realistically, from a coverage perspective, it's not actually that great. And I and it is literally a case of City Fibre trying to bang their own drum, but they do have a very valid point.
Yeah. What's his solution then, other than just be nicer to City Fibre?
Well, I think not necessarily be nicer to City Fibre, because I don't think they need people to be nice now.
Right.
With the fact that they've got 500 million injected into them through two funds from Goldman Sachs, they've got a lot of cash to actually push through and push out a greater fibre spine. They're in 12 cities at the moment, and they're probably going to expand that quite rapidly. The other element is the creation of altnets.
Yeah.
Now, this seems very attractive to the government, but ultimately altnets are very small in scale.
Yeah.
And at some point, because they cannot scale at the same rate as something like City Fibre, the performance is going to drop off, and you're just going to have a patchwork of poor performing altnets throughout
bits
the UK.
and bobs.
At some point, there's going to be consolidation.
Well, exactly. You chatted to Greg about it, didn't you? Just the assumption that it's all going to sort of consolidate.
I think they're going to go mental.
Right. Well, then City Fibre are just going to be buying up. He talks about distressed assets. I quite like that as a concept.
Yeah, it's a good.
Just picturing these assets going, oh, I'm having a really tough day.
I mean, for them, it's a very attractive proposition. You know, if you've got 50, let's say, altnets around the country, and there's some of them in attractive positions with fibre already laid into the ground, why wouldn't someone like City Fibre turn around and go, do you know what, I'm going to spend 5 million on acquiring that really small altnet, purely because it'll save me 3 years deploying, going through the red tape and deploying the network, and you know, you can do that 5-10 times.
Well, that's proper M&A. That's why, in principle, people should buy other companies, just because they decide it's more efficient than doing it themselves.
But that's
sometimes you get weird M&A where you just think they're doing it for a laugh.
But that's how they were effectively created. They combined several distressed assets and then expanded further. So I think City Fibre is definitely a company to keep an eye on. Yeah, I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with across the UK in a couple of years.
Ian, so you were there offering us moral support.
Kind of.
You laughed at one or two of my jokes.
Yeah. But it wasn't just me laughing, unfortunately.
Well, yes. Yeah, that would have been a bit embarrassing. It's just been you going, oh, you're so funny, Scott. So what do you, that first bit where you were talking about, we were talking to Greg Mesh and we were talking about general UK infrastructure. What did you take out of that?
I don't know if I've got much to add to what Jamie said. There's a limited amount we can say, obviously, because it's Chatham. I know he doesn't
mind. That's true, we're not even supposed to mention it.
Well, I don't think he minds he doesn't mind being talked about.
But we're not going to mention anyone else because we did, to try and get everyone to talk freely, we had Chat Master rule, which means that we're not allowed to tribute. So no one else was there except Greg Mesh.
I mean, he made reasonable points. There's need for competition, I suppose, at the infrastructure level in the UK market, and they're the company that seems to be in the best position to come along and provide that. They've got a big backer in the form of Goldman Sachs. They've already got a lot of kind of networks built out in towns outside the sort of M25 area, which is where they're kind of targeting.
I mean, that was a very interesting stat that you brought up, which was something like, what was it? Like 80% of GDP is outside of the N25. Yet they're the ones that are getting screwed over because all.
Is that true? 80% GDP is outside the M25?
It wouldn't surprise me.
I know we're very London focused economically as a country. But anyway.
But I thought it was interesting that he was saying the kind of investment attitude towards companies like City Fibre has changed in the last 4 years. And if you go back 8 years, there was a bit of resistance to making a sort of they weren't regarded as investable assets. Whereas now there's a kind of change in mentality where you've got companies like Goldman Sachs that are prepared to come along and take a sort of long-term view, and they put money in and they expect sort of yields within a sort of long period of time.
It wasn't just that they weren't investable assets. They weren't allowed to invest in them because it wasn't part of their limited charter or something like that.
What, for the companies themselves, the investors?
Yes, yeah. So they just basically weren't allowed to do it at all.
So I mean, it seems the way you look at the way things are going on the sort of fixed line side of the UK, you could see a situation in the next few years, I guess, where you have an open reach next to a City Fibre and a Virgin Media, and you sort of have a sort of more healthy infrastructure level of competition. I think there's still some challenges that he wants to see addressed. I mean, he's made this point before earlier in the year at another conference, but it's interesting to hear criticism of the regulatory side in terms of trying to get access to BT's infrastructure. Still doesn't feel it's a rescalable product. They can go and dip into it and get
that's
things.
He made that point.
Still
the ducts and poles.
And it doesn't make sense because that's where a lot of the expenses obviously is actually digging things up, and having to put down new ducts and poles would be ridiculous. So you want to actually try and make use of the same infrastructure wherever possible.
But he finds that the actual access or the utility is quite ad hoc and piecemeal.
Yeah, it's just not. They've used that expression before, not scalable. Trying to do it on a anything approaching a nationwide scale is still something that's quite difficult. So BT at the moment is obviously waiting on the government to come out with the next sort of set of recommendations about access to its infrastructure. This is all sort of coming out in the next, I think, December. They're hoping for it, although it might get slowed down with the whole sort of election.
Well, everything we get the impression that everything's on hold.
Everything might be on hold.
But everything was on hold because of Brexit, and now it's double on hold because of the election.
Yeah. And a Labour government could really kind of.
And that came up in your panel, Jamie, without naming any names. Brexit came up, and the general unanimity that the problem with it isn't even one way or the other. It's just that until people know what's going on, I think you characterise it as an excuse for them not to sort of invest.
I think so. I mean, I think that telcos are, and I think this actually leads on to the next point. If we're finished on this,
we can meander around.
Is that telcos don't want to spend because they are under financial pressure at the moment, and this isn't a challenge which is limited to any one telco. I think all of them across the industry have to find a lot of money from basically nowhere, and some of them, look at the likes of BT. Sometimes you've got to feel a bit sorry for BT. I know they've got this monstrous dominant position, but they have to upgrade fixed network and the mobile network. I mean, the headache in terms of logistics in managing the workforce, first and foremost. Then they've got to find all the money to do it. I mean, that's going to be a real headache. And I mean, leading on to the next point, it's Viva in Brazil. They've introduced a very quite an interesting model.
I'm going back in just because there's one more bit from today's thing that I want to talk about before we go into that. But I take your segue. But so let's get that other bit out of the way, and so that we can get back on with that. So the other half of the morning, the panel that I did was about cashing in on 5G, commercialising, monetising, whatever you want to call it, 5G. And I thought one of the most interesting things about it, a few times. So we had a real mixture of sort of operator, vendor, analysts on the panel, and I sort of challenged them a couple of times to go, so give me an example of something that's going to pay the bills on 5G. And this isn't to criticise any of them, but they were all a bit like, well, this sort of thing, that sort of thing. But they sort of struggled to
platform. platforms.
Platforms.
As soon as people start using words like platforms and verticals, you know that they don't really have any clue.
Well, I kind of forced them to use verticals. I was like, why haven't you said verticals? I like it. It's a nice, meaningless sort of corporate cliche. But so what I took away from that is that no one's really that sure. You know, the people on that panel were fairly representative of people who know what they're talking about in this industry, and none of them could really nail it. And I think they were just being honest. I think no one really knows. So there's two subsets of how to monetize 5G. There's consumer facing and business facing, B2C, B2C, B2B.
I think there's the more boring side to it as well, which is just the
pricing.
Efficiency.
Just the efficiency side.
Oh right, yeah.
You're going to upgrade your network at some point, and it doesn't sound very exciting to investors probably, but it's just a technology that's going to be neat. If they don't use 5G to support all these billions of connections that we're apparently going to have on networks, then they're going to be screwed in terms of cost structure, basically.
And they're supposed to, I had a one-on-one interview about automation as well, and that comes into the efficiency play. Of if more stuff is virtualized and more stuff's done through clever bits of software, then you need less people sort of turning knobs and dials and that sort of thing to make it all work. But yeah, so on the B2C side, the best most of people came up with was just sort of a price premium. Yeah. Which seems to vary. I think some places are doing it, but in the UK they seem to be struggling to demand a price premium.
I'm not optimistic that anybody's going to.
No.
Strategy's going to.
Why would any of us as a punter?
You went to the Romania thing. I think Dario. I can't mention names. So edit that.
You can mention.
He wouldn't mind being.
Because they're all on the speaker list anyway.
So Dario Oven was saying.
No one said anything
too contentious. Of Orange's launch in Romania this week, which Kim mentioned as well because it's in the public domain, and he went to that, Jamie.
Yeah.
And apparently I didn't know because I wasn't there, but apparently they're pricing that at a bit of a premium. But you just wonder BT started doing this as the first company to launch 5G in the UK. They very quickly came in with some slightly high tier pricing, and then I think they've immediately kind of had to sort of reduce
because
price
Vodafone and O2.
Because Vodafone quickly came in and was it O2? Yeah,
O2 recently launched at a no price premium at all.
You don't pay anything extra at all compared with your
Three did it first. They said you get because we've got such a limited footprint.
Right.
You can, if you've got our unlimited 4G tariff, you can get 5G for free when you're in range of a base station. And Vodafone turned around and did the speed tiering rather than price tiering.
Which is novel.
Yeah.
Novel, but isn't
that's one of the top 5 stories I'm going to talk about later.
I think that's one of the most intelligent pricing strategies I've seen, and Elisa have already proved that it works because they did exactly the same thing for 4G in Finland.
Right.
I genuinely think it works.
Yeah, well, there's something to be said for sort of pricing, billing, tariff innovation. And when they talk about the B2C side in terms of monetizing 5G, it's just a sort of utopian stuff like augmented reality and heads-up displays on your glasses and all that sort of stuff, and sort of streaming games and a few other things. And I'm sure all of those will turn into something, but they feel quite far-fetched in terms of concrete mass market commercialisation to me right now.
I mean, I think everyone's looking at it a little bit too simplistically. Everyone's looking for a way to say, right, okay, is 5G going to make us money? And I don't think 5G's... I probably don't think 5G's going to make anyone that much money. I think when you combine it with, the cloud, IoT, artificial intelligence, and 5G, and a change in form factor and increasable wearable devices. Yeah. When you combine all of those building blocks, then you start to get a transformed society. For instance, like the best example I can give is from a healthcare perspective, where you wear a wearable device and it tracks your heartbeat, your blood pressure, how many steps you're doing, how many calories you're eating. You can monitor it all on your smartphone, which is then immediately beamed up to the cloud, centrally stored through a blockchain application. The healthcare, the NHS people can monitor you remotely
and manage chronic conditions.
Then they can, all of a sudden you get alerts, and ambulances are always automatically summoned. As soon as you go into the GP, you've got all of the information accessible. That's
in theory.
But it's kind of like 4G. It's like there's lots of benefits. I agree. It's even better with 5G than it was with 4G, which has already given rise to amazing innovations, things like Uber that we kind of take for granted now. But the telcos haven't benefited from it.
Yeah.
The last time the telcos benefited was when people were buying mobile phones and they hadn't had mobile phones before.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you went from somebody without any service, not paying anything for something, to, it's the same as we saw in emerging markets recently with this big growth. And then as soon as it gets to 100%, the only way to try and get growth is to get people to spend more money on additional services, and that's the thing they've always struggled to do. So all these things are great, but no one's going to spend any money on them. That's the problem.
I don't entirely agree with that. Because there was something that I'd never heard of before, and I probably should have heard of it when we were in Romania this week, and it's called number share and eSIM. So basically, you can share your number across multiple devices. So, for instance, across a single bill, you have a SIM in a wearable, X amount of wearable devices, your smartphone, and things like your connected car. So all of a sudden, you start driving a lot more data usage, and therefore higher bills through multiple SIMs connected to a single contract, because you're absorbing connectivity through multiple devices. And then I think that is but obviously, part of that is dependent on them winning the connected car ecosystem, and I think that's a very good way to do it, plus the wearables ecosystem. Although they're falling behind on that, the OS guys seem to have grabbed hold of that.
Well, that's part of the reason of the last podcast we talked about.
I just think they're going to face the same problem as they faced with trying to. It's the same as when 3G came along and companies were spending ridiculous amounts of money on 3G licenses, and the assumption was that if you have a data service, you'll spend more money because you have voice and data there.
But then they took about 10 years to work out.
Adding extra devices to it. There's a finite amount on what a household will spend on communications products, and those prices are always getting driven down anyway. So just because people have 20 connected devices in the home or
you say there's a finite amount. I bet people spend more on.
I bet it'll go.
A combination of broadband and mobile now than they did 10 years ago.
But
I don't know.
The point is, your bill, your number of connected devices that you have is probably going to go up from 1 or 2 in the last 10 years to 20 or 30.
Totally.
The amount you're spending is not going to go up like that. It's
possibly
not even going to go up at all. It might go up a little bit.
It'll definitely go up.
It might go up a bit, but
no, because think about it. Because you change your lifestyle and you spend more money on stuff because it's available and because your lifestyle has changed. Like for instance, online entertainment. Like how much would you have spent on subscription services 20 years ago? Probably nothing. But now, how much do you spend on the likes of Netflix, Amazon Prime, all these, and I reckon, arguably, you guys, you've got families, you'll probably spend a lot more if a new child-friendly service emerged. You'll probably go, actually, bugger it for an extra £5 a month.
Yes,
another way of getting it to shut up.
But even then, there's a limit, and this is why there was concern about Apple coming into the market. How many of these services? This is why we talk about the aggregator model. How many of these services are people going to buy and keep spending? A lot of those services I think are probably eaten into interest in more expensive satellite TV, for instance. Anyway, on the one hand, they know that we've basically dumped Sky and gone just with OTT stuff.
So your point is that the sum total of your spend, it just sort of the form changes.
You're not going to buy 5 or 6 different OTT services if the prices of each one is going to go up to 12, 13 quid in the next few years, and Netflix keeps putting its prices up. So
I hear you. So the only other string to that bow is that there's a B2B one, which was interesting because normally, and this was certainly the case earlier on today, people seem to feel a bit more confident sort of fleshing that one out. Like we can see how you would spend money on some kind of connected stadium or a connected factory where you know where everything is, or ports. And
I think that's a hard
transport and
logistics.
logistics. Well, it's harder for them to make work. I agree, because you're having to get involved in other industries that you're not familiar with. You have to operate at scale, all that sort of thing. But people seem to have a clearer picture of where they think the money would be if you can pull it off.
Well, it's new business, I suppose. Yeah. It's not. So that's the problem with the consumer side, is that it's already a saturated market. Whereas this isn't a new opportunity. But the problem there is there's so much complexity.
Yes.
It's not. You're not
and
selling.
So far
you're not
from
selling
their core
a connection. just a connection service. You're selling like an IT solution, basically. So that's not necessarily a role that the telcos are best suited to play. Like a lot of people that you talk to in the industry say that it's much more likely that the kind of systems integrators, those kinds of companies, are the ones that will go and basically the telcos will fit in, but they're not going to take charge. They're not going to
no, so they've got to be careful they don't get completely marginalised and commoditised by the SIs.
And they'll just be providing connectivity.
Yeah, exactly.
They make some money out of it, but not as much as they could.
So they're trying to stake a bit of a claim, whether it's being in partnership with SIs or whether it's just getting chummy with certain industries. I'm trying to avoid saying vertical.
It does say vertical, yeah.
There's no need for that. So yes, okay, all right. Look, that's all cool. We're going to go on. Sorry.
Sorry. There is an opportunity to make a lot of money by being a commoditised service. It's just no one seems to want to do it. I mean, not only we're talking about a utility focuses instead of on value creation, on efficiencies. You know, the likes of Centrica still make profits every single year.
So it's breaking out a bubbly at 3:15.
But there's other really interesting business models, which I think could be a really big opportunity, is wholesaling connectivity to the likes of Renault. You know, these guys want to control the customer relationship and want to create a long-term relationship with their customer. Because traditionally, aside from the service you do once a year, you don't really get crap about Renault. But if they can wholesale Renault, connectivity, it allows them to maintain a relationship. But that extends to every connected object and every connected, speakers, Bose. You could wholesale connectivity to Bose, or you could do it to Philips. That is a commoditised utility relationship.
Yeah. But it requires a lot of scale before you start making any wedge out of it.
A lot of scale, but why not? Why? I mean, as soon as connectivity gets into cars on a bigger scale than it is now, they're going to hoover up data when it comes to. Can you imagine if Renault put sort of TV screens on the back of every passenger seat and driver's seat? That's going to hoover up data on a 3-hour drive if you want to keep the kids happy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's almost no limit to the amount you spend to keep your kids stum on a car journey. Okay, cool. All right. Let's move on to one or two other non-event things. I'll just say, for the record, I thought it went really well. It's really fun being up there. The audience seemed to respond well. You did a great job, Jamie, handling those early panels, because we were both kind of winging it, weren't we? But I thought we winged it quite well. So hurrah for us, basically, and I'm sure we'll do it again next year. Right, moving on. Jamie, you alluded to it earlier. One of the news stories that caught your eye this week is something going on in Latin America. Why don't you tell us more?
Yeah, it's just a really interesting model on how to expand fibre footprints. I mean, it's so it comes out of Telefonica and their Terra and Vivo brands in Brazil. Now, I mean, Telefonica is a business which is in a bit of trouble at the moment. It's got
They've always got sick amounts of debt, haven't they?
It's like 43 billion or something like that. And although that doesn't seem like an intolerable amount to multinationals nowadays, investors want it down. But they still need to invest in the networks and make sure they remain competitive in the long run. So they decided to franchise their network in that the franchisee pay for network infrastructure and pay for the expansion, but they'll get access to all the scalability and the procurement relationships that Telefonica has in place globally.
Okay.
They lose control, they lose some of the profits, but it's a very good way to get the brand further away and into the smaller cities.
And mitigate the sort of financial risk a little bit.
Temporary, a little bit. Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, it'll be lessened. I mean, it's not going to disappear, but it'll be lessened. But it's a compromise.
Does that seem like a good idea to you?
Sounds great.
Yeah. Are you all over it?
I'm all over it. I didn't cover it myself. So.
No.
It does. Yeah, I can see the attractions of doing it.
I can see a lot of. I doubt many telcos will take it on, because they're quite traditional beasts.
Yeah.
But I can see that being a very, very useful.
So do you think part of the reason Telefonica's sort of trying stuff out is because its hands forced a little bit by its debt situation?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, they've reduced direct debt by $7 billion over the last 12 months.
Right, that's something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good, but they're still under a lot
Big
of
gutting
pressure.
if you've paid off $7 billion, you've still got tons.
Yeah, he's still got
Still
like
have
40.
got tons.
Yeah.
But so this was they recently released a new business model for their towers unit.
Yeah.
And because the towers unit, they tried to IPO to recover some funds about 2 or 3 years ago. So they're desperate for new ways to make cash, but they still need to invest.
Ian, you've been covering this beat a bit longer than I have.
Yeah.
How did Telefonica get all this debt?
Well, they're not unusual.
Was it M&A or was it just...
It's usually M&A activity. They're all the European incumbents. Right. They've all got fairly high net debt to EBITDA is how it usually gets measured, I think. And it's all, for all of them, it's tracking. It's sort of
Oh, I see.
2.5 to
So they're
3.
not necessarily out there.
Well, they're one of the
One of the
ones
worst.
they're one of the high ones, along
Highest.
with I think the other one is Telecom Italia is on the
Right.
high side. But even like Deutsche Telecoms has gone up again recently
Okay.
to outside its comfort zone actually, which is
Right.
one of the reasons why the ratings agencies have sort of written it down because they look at those ratios a lot and pay a lot of attention to them. But they're doing Deutsche Telekom's doing well on the. Its results are out today, and it's doing well on the earnings side at the moment, so people are not that worried about it. Yeah,
a few euros.
I mean, I think the issue with
panic stations or anything.
I think the issue with Telefonica and Telecom Italia is when you look at the markets that they're actually exposed in. You know, these are the vast majority are emerging markets,
Yeah.
and while there's a huge amount of opportunity in this market, it's also presented with a huge amount of risk. You know, we talk about the BRICS. We used to talk about the BRICS countries years ago. How many of those countries actually fulfilled the promise?
Right.
China did.
China certainly did.
Brazil, arguably, probably not. It's on its way. Russia, arguably, probably not. It's on its way. India is definitely getting there now. But we've been talking about
Took a
BRICS
while,
for the last decade.
Yeah.
You know, these are.
Don't get me started on India's telecoms market.
Well,
It's a
yeah.
car crash at the moment.
But Telecom Italia and TIM are exposed in these markets, and Deutsche Telekom isn't. I mean, they might have debt, but they've got T-Mobile, which is absolutely gunning it at the moment.
Yeah.
So they got a lot of assets
They look like
they can
they might
lean
actually
on.
finally
And the
finish
European
up.
businesses are starting to do well all of a
Yeah.
sudden. So they're making quite a good stab at the whole convergence thing.
So Telefonica needs Latin America to raise its game a little bit, hence...
Well, they've
James.
sold a few assets, obviously, to try and get the balance sheet under control to some extent. They sold some Central American stuff and some stuff in Europe,
Yeah.
and obviously tried to get out of the UK.
Yeah.
2
was
years
still
ago, was it?
really
I can't remember when it
surprised
was now. When did they do that?
They're still
I
doing
can't-
well. I did their O2's quarterly, so pretty solid.
I can't believe. I mean, I think they're in a bit of trouble moving forwards, but I can't believe they want to get rid of their probably their most profitable
No,
business.
Not get rid, they wanted to sort of, I don't know,
They won't
to
anymore.
consolidate it, whatever.
I think they're in trouble moving forwards. To be perfectly honest, they need to diversify their business model because you cannot be a pure play mobile player and hope to compete with the best
Okay.
and generate the revenues needed to reinvest into the network. I think they're in a slightly precarious position, especially with Three launching fixed wireless access.
Yeah, and they're in the same situation in Germany as well. That's the other thing. Their two big European markets outside Spain are
Pure play mobile.
Really. You know, they kind of rely on a relationship with Deutsche Telekom in Germany, and they're big because they had a merger there a few years ago with a bit of KPN, I think, that they acquired.
Because they are the
E-Plus, is it
market
called,
leader,
or
aren't
something?
they?
Oh yeah, E+, yeah, I
They're the
remember
market
that.
leader in terms of subscribers, but not revenues, and they don't have the sort of strong broadband TV play that Vodafone and DT. And Vodafone now has obviously just come off the back of this Unity Media takeover, so they're going to become a more powerful player in that market following that move.
I mean, the UK is really interesting as well. I mean, just BT looks like it's actually sorting its life out with its assets, and it's going to marry all their assets into one conclusive bundle, which I think will be an attractive proposition to some people. 3 has a very, very loyal and dedicated following, and they will. They've got 800,000 fixed wireless access customers before they even launched their 5G.
And they got a ton of mid-band spectrum from the UK broadband.
Loads of mid-band. And then you look at Vodafone with they've tied up with City Fibre to do their fibre offering, and then you look at Virgin Media is now shifting its MVNO agreement across to the Vodafone network. So what could they do from a convergence offering with their 5G services on the Vodafone network? I think the UK market is actually starting to look really, really interesting. There could be a lot of movers or shakers over the next couple of years.
The other thing maybe coming out of the show today was, and again, and it's Chatham House was, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind us mentioning it, Gabriel Brown was quite optimistic, I think, about where he thinks the market's going to be in the next 3 or 4 years in terms of 5G and the quality of networks that we have in the country in the next 3 years. I think he made the specific comment. I think everybody's underestimating how quickly these networks will roll out.
I know, I was sort of posing the question, assuming I was going to get the usual, everyone's getting a bit carried away thing, but he was quite
quite bullish on where he thinks it's going to go, and obviously he's driven by there's quite a lot of competition at the moment, people sort of pushing each other along. So.
Cool, okay. So, last topic, Ian, you're at an event this week.
Try not to spend too long on it, shall we? The AI in networks.
Well, it takes as long as you need me.
Yeah, so it's Telco AI Summit.
Well done. Is that it?
I'm sure it was great, mate. Sounds like a ball.
Which was another group event that we had elsewhere in London.
I went to it last year. It's a really good event.
It's a good event, yeah. So there's a lot of talk about how they're using AI specifically. The sessions that I was focusing on were really sort of looking at how they're using AI on the network side rather than using it for things like chatbots and stuff like that to improve customer services. And there's quite interesting announcements actually from a couple of European players. So A1, which is the Telecom Austria group, which is now majority owned by American Mobile, so it's quite a significant player. But they've basically built their own AI system for network management and maintenance, essentially. So they can do things like figure out where. The guy was saying it's going to be really, really important when it comes to 5G because they need to, things we've just been talking about. They just spend so much money on 5G rollout, and the revenues aren't necessarily there. So there's a lot of pressure to basically get that capex budget just right and optimise your spending. So they can use this to work out demand patterns. A lot of it's based on looking at what's happening on the 4G side, but working out where they need to optimise capex and where they need to put in
a very sort of targeted, specific
in a really targeted way. And Orange is looking at doing a similar thing. So the guy from Orange who was talking was saying we reckon we can have at a sort of cell site level, you could have a double-digit percentage decrease in capex spending by using these AI tools. And I managed to chat to the Telecom Austria guys during a break, and they wouldn't put a figure on it, but say it's like if you look at what we can do in a legacy environment without the AI tools and what we can do with them, it's quite a significant difference. So it's called Sarah. The really interesting thing about it is they've launched it. It's already operational in a few markets, and they're kind of expanding it across the group, but they're putting it into Claro Colombia, which is one of the American reveals. So it's actually outside the Telecom Austria group, but part of the same broader group. And then he was saying there's an opportunity possibly in future to actually start selling it to other telcos. So obviously the companies they're probably not going to be competing against in the same market.
Ideally.
But if someone like, I don't know, KDDI in Japan or something didn't have the same features, and they could potentially, which is quite similar to what a company called Elisa in Finland's done. It's a service provider there. You mentioned it on the sort of speed tier stuff earlier, but they've done the same thing. They're really innovative on the sort of automation side. They've got a lot of automation tools that they now have as a sort of separate commercial unit. They're selling that expertise to other telcos, and they can do that because they're quite a small operator. They're not really in competition with anybody outside Finland, so they're quite happy to go and flog this stuff to operators in other markets. It's a potential revenue generator for them in the future, as well as a way of making their kind of network operations more efficient.
Cool. Look at us putting on top events this week. So, Jamie, do you have any more thoughts on that Telco AI stuff, or should we wrap it up there?
I haven't looked.
That's fine, man. That's fine.
I haven't got anything to add there, to be honest.
That's fine. So, so we're recording this on Thursday. because we've got the awards coming up later, and that's normally a late night, and no one feels like doing anything on the Friday. So that's the reason we're doing it now. But thanks a lot, guys. It's been a long old day. 2 events in one day, isn't it? That's why I'm drinking the sparkling water and not the gin and tonic. I've got to stand up on stage with Miles Jupp and try and not make a fool of myself. So we'll leave it there. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot. Sorry, before I forget, we get one more little appearance from our sponsors. I'll cut to them now.
Mobile service providers will need a different approach to successfully roll out 5G new radio capabilities. Check out Amdocs Software automated and analytics-driven solutions at amdocs.com/5G-fast to learn more.
Okay, so thank you very much for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.